Welcome to another Carolina Snowflake Meetup session. Today is August 23rd. Happy Monday to everybody. And today we're going to be talking about Snowflake Tasks. And well, actually, it's a Snowflake task, just like there is a table object. So you call them tables. There's a task object in Snowflake, and we call them tasks collectively, right? And so we're going to just kind of walk through that. I'd love to hear everybody's input and feedback if they've used Task before and that type of thing. This is I don't think it's a newer feature. I don't even remember when they came out with Task, actually, to be honest with you. And we've been using them for a while on lots of different projects, but I don't remember when it was incarnated, to be honest. And lots of people I find who are coming just from a pure SQL background, they're not sure how to even use them. They're maybe still getting familiar with ETL, and there's some confusion. So I'm hoping that in this session we can kind of elucidate and kind of clarify some misconceptions, and also talk about some of the powerful uses of tasks. As always, meetup rules: just be kind, participate, and videos optional. And of course, follow us on Data Lakehouse on LinkedIn and Twitter, and AICG as well on LinkedIn. Love to hear from everybody. So I think our agenda is old. So this is from the last one. I thought we had changed it, but so we're really gonna be talking about tasks and very similar concept. Be looking at tasks, its purpose. We're gonna do a walkthrough. So just replace everything you see there with variants, which was our last meetup, with tasks from this meetup. And so speaking of our last meetup, yes, if you're fans of the Disney Loki, and you were part of that meeting last time, we talked a lot about variants and the variant time authority, the VTA, I think it is, from that show. Really cool show if you haven't watched it. And for those who asked the question, we do have the recordings of all these meetups available about 1 to 3 days after we have it, and they're posted on our YouTube AICG channel. So be sure to check us out over there. There's a link, and we send out the slides and the link to the YouTube video once we have it posted for everybody. So no worries there. Check us out as often as possible. All right, just a refresher again, keep this super short for everyone coming back in. Snowflake Data Cloud, very powerful, almost infinite scale, very fast processing. It's kind of the world's answer to doing data warehousing on the internet right now as a platform as a service. We like it, we recommend it, we think it's great. It solves a lot of different problems across a lot of different industries, vertical and definitely horizontally across the enterprise. And we have customers, and we know people who are ingesting all types of data that you wouldn't even think about off the top of your head. And they're running it through that funnel of ELT and ETL to get meaningful information out of their data, create insights and that type of thing, from all different types of consumption layers, whether it be machine learning, business analytics, and so forth and so on. So that is kind of Snowflake in a very, very, very quick nutshell. And we can talk Snowflake and its internals and its power all day long, but in these meetups, we like to just kind of drill down into some specific topics. And tonight's topic is about Snowflake tasks. And so let's hit on some of the general purpose and power of Snowflake tasks. And if anybody has any questions, of course, throw the questions into the chat. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear if you guys are using tasks currently, if you're using any part of the Snowflake data pipeline. And I consider the data pipeline really anything at the point of ingestion into Snowflake and doing any type of transformation or any type of logic. And I consider task as part of that data pipeline. Obviously there's Snowflake pipes, you've got streams, and tasks are kind of part of that framework, if you will. So it has a lot to do with Snowflake, clearly. And if you look at the definition of a task, it's really a piece of work to be done or undertaken. It's really, I wouldn't even say a complement, or I would say it's a counterpart to Snowflake streams or table stream. I can't remember really seeing it disconnected anytime we've set up streams, and there's tasks right there. And we've got an upcoming topic on Snowflake streams. I think we've got some links in here for you guys to check out that topic, but right now we're just going to drill down on task. It's definitely great for executing any type of SQL or stored procedures on any type of frequency. We actually use it for kind of building out some rough, incrementally, slowly changing dimensions sometimes in certain situations. It's a good way to prototype that actually as well, to just kind of get feeds of data incrementally within Snowflake itself without having to like connect outside and pull things in. So there's some benefits there. I would almost even call it debugging potential, but we can talk about that later. And one other cool thing is you can actually link tasks. So there can be a dependency tree there on task. And for those familiar with something like Airflow or something where there's like an acyclic dependency graph in some of the kind of the new orchestration tools that are out there, open source or commercial. And with task, you really aren't creating a true acyclic tree. It's more of just a dependency tree, right? So you can't have one task dependent on two other tasks, right? There can be a one-to-one reference. And you can use session variables and things like that to help drive the task forward. So it's actually really cool. I mean, when you really think about it, they've actually built a scheduling system for the most part inside of Snowflake. And we'll keep talking about that. What else do we hear about tasks inside of Snowflake? Well, it seems to be actually fairly frequently used once people get to like the advanced concepts of Snowflake, I would say. We have a lot of companies get into Snowflake from like the very beginnings of the journey. And even though we have, some of the more advanced techniques in mind, a lot of time it's just, get the data in there raw, drive towards the requirements, drive towards, business value based on getting that data, analyzing it, turn it into information. And as we're going through that process, all those advanced features have a purpose and a place. But like I mentioned, Snowflake Streams, great place. Using tasks, there's actually a built-in system function called stream has data, and you can tie that into a task. So like when the stream has data, at the increment the task is running, then you can call that stream and then read from it, which basically pulls out the incremental stream from that stream table. So there's some other cool things there. You could also technically use it to build real-time views, right? Like if you had a task that's running every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, 2 days, 1 hour, you could actually then like create a view, right? That's aggregating things up. So you've got this view, kind of like a materialized view concept, but through tasks, right? Refreshing objects, same thing, like you're recreating a view, that type of thing. And then I kind of mentioned this incremental frequency of loading data. So great for like prototyping, but you can use it in the real production scenario. So that's kind of cool. And someone actually mentioned this to me, I would almost say years ago at this point, that you could actually kind of mock up this idea of triggers. So if you guys remember, if you're familiar, Snowflake doesn't have triggers. Most databases, I always think of Oracle when I think of triggers, but so a trigger is typically something when something happens on a table. You write a trigger for when you want something to happen based on something happening, usually in a table. So a row is inserted or something like that. And so that concept doesn't technically exist inside of Snowflake, but you could kind of mock something up, right? So you could create a task that runs every minute, and then it could kind of write some sort of query statement that's probably deterministic. And if it pulls back X, then do Y, right? Whatever that Y is. So it's kind of like a trigger, but not real time. All right. So I'm curious. I don't know if the chat is open. Let me see. I see a couple one chat there. Let me see. All right. Yeah. Well, we'll absolutely push out the slides. People, no problem. Sounds recording. Absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to take a guess, or I'd even wager that people really aren't using streams that frequently, or task. I think it really has to, really have to get to more of like the intricate details of it using the advanced portions of Snowflake. Otherwise, I think a lot of people are probably just going to leverage like their ELT tool or their ETL tool to kind of do some of that lifting, and that's okay, right? Nothing wrong with that. Okay. So let me see. Real time. Correct. Yeah. So tasks aren't real time. So we're gonna jump into that. I'll actually answer the question now just for sake of time. So if you see the second bullet here, what we're going to go over, we're going to kind of do like a real world demo right now. We're actually going to kind of build some tasks out and watch it run through the full cycle. And then the second bullet point there, we're going to discuss cron. So if anyone is familiar with Linux and Unix and kind of the old, I won't say old school, Linux still runs the net right now. So there's something called cron job, big on Unix and Linux. And so that's basically like a scheduler system. And if I recall correctly, like the lowest you can get down in a cron job is down to the minute. So you could run the cron job to kick off a script or something every minute of every hour of every day, of every week, every month, right? That type of thing. And so from what we've seen, again, there's probably a Snowflake, engineer that actually like wrote the code for this, and they're like ready to like, reach through their monitor and grab me and say no. But so what we've seen is like the lowest increment is down to a minute. I could probably read back through the documentation and it could probably tell me it's down to 30 seconds or, but based on the cron job logic, I think it's every lowest you can get to is a minute frequency. So when we say real time, like we have in the comments, that gets me back to 20 years in analytics and data warehousing. Like, let's get real time. And does real time for you really mean real time, or does it mean near real time? And if it means near real time, then I think tasks have us covered. So, but for polling and other things like that, like that's where like Snowflake pipes and other things come into play. So as soon as like some data lands into like your S3 bucket, just as an example, then you've got, what is it, the SQS triggering Snowflake to kind of connect that pipe, and then it's ingesting based as soon as something lands inside of S3. So that's about as realish time as you're going to get, right? So hopefully that answered the question. So then we're going to look at how to link a task and then how to run a task to call a stored procedure, because inside a stored procedure, you can do some pretty cool stuff, right? So we'll talk about that. So what are steps we're going to take? We're going to create the task. We're going to maybe alter the task. We'll show the tasks that are there, and we'll view the tasks, like running process and that type of thing. Probably not in that order in those steps, but we'll do most of those steps. All right, let me just check the chat window one more time, see if there's any other questions popping up. But great questions, happy to see them. Thank you guys for shooting those over. Okay, so, oh yeah, a couple more slides actually. Key observations. If you think about all these nuanced sort of objects, how do you really become like a super expert? And I think the devil's in the details. So for task, there's just three things like our team pulled out. One, security. So there's something interesting where there's actually a privilege that you need to grant a role that is going to create and operate that task. And so the account admin is really the only role that can grant the privilege to another role, and then whoever has that role can then, in essence, create a task, right? And so that privilege is called execute task. Then the next one is dependency. So I mentioned an acyclic graph. So again, there's only one connection for dependency. So one task can only be dependent on 0 or 1 tasks. And we'll talk about how to do that. And then the last piece, which I always find interesting, I often forget, is that when the task is actually executing, it's actually executing as a system service. So even though you might get the access to create the task, but when the task actually runs, right, based on whatever frequency you set up, it's actually kind of running, let's just call it in the background. And you're still the owner if you created it and you have the ownership right, but what's actually running it is a system service. So in essence, if like somebody were to like delete your profile, for example, in theory, your task would still run. It wouldn't break your task from running on the frequency, that type of thing. So it actually runs as a system service. Cron scheduling, yes. So this is what I was talking about. I actually snagged this one from Google Cloud, but cron is basically a Linux and Unix function. So if Snowflake's using it, or Google or Microsoft, it doesn't matter. It's the same structure. They're not going to change the cron. So you can kind of see here from like the schedule fields that the lowest you can get down to is the minute. And so if they're using the cron process for scheduling jobs, then the lowest you're going to get down to is in essence 1 minute as the lowest micro frequency. And again, I could be wrong, and I'm hoping somebody chimes in the comments or gives us feedback on the meetup or a blog or something to tell me that I'm wrong. And if we find that we're wrong, we'll post it. If it's down, if it's actually 10 seconds, 30 seconds. So what we're going to build in this quick hands-on demo is just this flow. We're going to do I said a real-time run through, as in like real-time on this session with the demo. So we're gonna have one main task, and I like that even GitHub and everybody, they're not calling it the master task anymore, they're calling it main task. So we're gonna take this main task, and it's gonna have two subtasks. So task A will be dependent on main task, and task B will be dependent on main task. And then there'll be one subtask, so that'll be a subtask to task B. And the subtask is gonna call the store procedure. So hopefully that diagram makes sense, and that's what we're gonna do right now. And so let me jump into it. A couple things that have to get set up first. So I'm going to jump over here. Can you guys see the Snowflake worksheet environment? Is that, yes? Okay, cool. Now let me see if I can blow this up a little bit, just for the sake of our conversation. Okay, so I'm going to step through this, and hopefully it's not too boring or too pedantic. Let me just kind of minimize. We know it's going to work, so you can kind of see my pre-test here. So this whole first set is all about creating assigning the privilege to a role. And as you guys know, security and Snowflake is really all role-based. So what we're going to do is we're going to use security admin, and we're going to create this task, which I already have created. So we'll see what if it bombs on us. Yeah. So it already exists for me. So Snow Task Admin. And one thing that we're going to throw this out in our security best practices meetup in a few weeks, or a webinar. But what we have as the best practice is when we create roles, we use underscore all the time to kind of break up the role name, because all of the roles from Snowflake are single word. So when you're looking at it, it's very easy to just discern, hey, which one's a custom role and which one's a Snowflake role. And by the way, if nobody's passed their SnowPro core test, like it's an actual question of what are all the system roles from Snowflake out of the box, just FYI, if you're taking that test. Okay, and then we're gonna go ahead and use that role, because we want the account admin role to go here and to grant the execute task privilege on account to this new role that I created. Oops, we'll do that. And then, of course, as you guys know, we use a security role to then actually do the grants to our custom roles. So we've got two custom roles here that we already have, and we'll just assign those, and everything should succeed. So that's good. All right. And then, of course, just using standard Snowflake syntax. Everybody should be doing this when you're writing scripts, of course. So here we're just going to make sure we're using the correct database and the correct warehouse, just in case anything changed as we're navigating from worksheet to worksheet. I'm going to go ahead and use my my key role, the data lakehouse role. And then I'm going to go ahead and create the schema that we're going to work in. So just kind of go and create that. Okay, now we're getting down to brass tacks. So we've got all our housekeeping out of the way. We've got our execute task privilege created. It's assigned to our role, and we've got our schema. So now we're just going to create this kind of just really dumb demo table. It has 3 columns in it. And these all are just very generic, right? There's no great business purpose behind this table. So row option, row status, and then row timestamp, right? So we usually use TS for timestamp suffix naming. So go ahead and create that table. Now this one's interesting. So what we're doing is we're just creating a store procedure using standard Snowflake syntax. But what the store procedure is actually going to do is this syntax here. It's actually going to insert into that table an incremental value on the max record with OK as the filter, I think. Yeah, or SPOK as a filter. So it's basically just going to do an increment, because what we want to do is we want to go from, in this logic, I don't know if I was clear on it. So we're going to run this main task, and it's going to basically insert a value into that demo table. Then it's going to run these 2 tasks basically at the same time. And these two are going to insert a new record. And then this one here is going to look at the value from this record and increment it by 1 by calling the store procedure. So very, very basic, very generic sort of test and logic to follow. So if I run this right now, we'll see that if I do run, all right, it actually inserts a record. That's what we're going to do from the store procedure. And if we do a quick select all from this table, then we should see this value, just 1, because, well, that's what our logic has. So it's just going to insert 1. We've got status OK, and then gives us our timestamp. So we'll know when rows are being inserted or being updated and that type of thing because of the timestamp. So let's go ahead and create our procedure. Remember, in Snowflake, the worksheets are fixed ended at the semicolon. So all I have to do is click anywhere within the semicolon or prior to semicolon, and then do Command Enter, and that runs the command that's in front of the semicolon. So that created the procedure as you see there. And so I'm just going to test it one more time, make sure it works. This live demo, and we'll see. Okay, so that actually worked, and it returned true because I'm actually returning a Boolean value. And let's just go back up real quick and run this and see what we have. Okay, so you can see here that this was what happened when I ran the logic the first time, and then here it actually took this value and then did a plus on it, so just incremented it by this number 1. All right, so now let's go and create those tasks. So hopefully everybody can kind of still see the logic here. So now I'm just going to create this task. So what are we doing? Create or replace task. This is the task name. Again, I'll use underscores in all of our logic as a best practice. We're going to use this warehouse, right? So think about it. The warehouse is important because remember, when it runs, it's running behind the scenes. So you don't get to set the warehouse later on. And so, well, unless you run an alter statement. But if you don't set the warehouse, then it's just going to probably pick the default warehouse. Or actually, I've never actually run it without the warehouse, but so that we should actually try that to see if it breaks. But anyway, you want to define a warehouse so you know which under what compute it's going to run. And then here you can see here we're running with a 2-minute schedule. I could run it with a cron job schedule, even based on a time zone. I just have that commented out. So if anybody wants to really see that run or get into that discussion, we can definitely do that as well. So I'm just running it every 2 minutes. And then you can see here, so create the task with this warehouse, schedule for every 2 minutes. And then this after this as is where you put your logic. And what we're doing here is that we're just inserting a value, inserting a 1. We've got this status so we can kind of know it's coming from the main task. And then we're doing the timestamp. So when I run this, again, it's just creating the task, right? It's not going to run it. So when I execute this line, it's just going to create the task. And then here's our subtask A. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating the status subtask A, okay, and with a value of 1,000. And so I'll run that. Now notice this one clause here because it's dependent on the main task. So this is saying after. It doesn't say run after, execute after. I like the simplicity of Snowflake. It just says create or replace task. This is my long task name, warehouse after task demo main task, which is this task that I just created. Okay, so it will know to run or execute after the main task completes, which is going to happen every 2 minutes. Okay. Same thing with subtask B. You know, if you revert back to our diagram, B, it is going to run after task demo main task. So let's run that again. So run this one. Okay. And it's going to put in a higher incremental value just so we can separate them out. And subtask B, okay. And then the last one that we're going to run is this guy. So I often like testing. I think I have a QA background. I love testing the length of object naming that you can do. So this is a pretty long one. And so this one you can see it's going to run after task B. So here's our task B dependency on the main task. How many times can I say task during this session? And so this one's going to run after B. It 100% follows our graphing dependency chart. So, and you can see here, now the logic is a call to the store procedure with an incremental value of 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this or create this rather. Okay, so all those have been created. Now, in essence, it should be running right now, right? It should be, the clock should be ticking. Right? So what I can do is I can go here to show tasks. and I should see all 4 of my tasks. I can see it's scheduled, I can see it's suspended in the state suspended because it's just not running right now. And really, unless we have a process that's taking a long time to run, and in Snowflake, that's probably pretty hard to do unless it's an intense task. I think it's always, for the most part, by the time you query this, show task, your state of the task will most likely be suspended, if that makes sense. Okay, and there's some other logic over here that we can take a look at. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start looking at the table. So that's kind of the key part. That's how you create a task. So it's a table, a stored procedure, and a set of tasks that have dependencies. We're gonna show how we can actually see dependencies here in a moment as well. So let me just increment this one more time, make it bigger for everybody. Okay, so I'm gonna run this, and now we can see that we've got the 4 rows. Nope, sorry, wrong task. Let me run this. Okay, so we still just have the 2. All right, fingers crossed this is actually gonna work. And here I'm gonna do a test. So I'm gonna run where it's equal to main okay. So when we know the main task fires, then we'll be able to see it here, right? But right now we have 0. Okay. We can suspend tasks. So once we get this going, we can say, hey, either the main task is just completely suspended, or a subtask we can suspend so that doesn't run. And so at any time you can turn one of those off. And that's really great if you think about it. Like, let's pretend you're building a data mart or something like that, and you've got some dimensions and you've got some fact tables, and you don't want to kill your entire flow. Like, for some reason you're actually building your data mart using tasks, which I might advise against. But you could just suspend one part of that tree if you wanted to, if it is all built on tasks, for example. So that's kind of cool. So I won't suspend that. Let's see if anything kicked off. Nope, not yet. So here what we can do is we can do a resume statement. I'm just going to kind of walk through this, and we'll kind of open it up for discussion and see if things are working correctly. So I'm going to resume this, and I'm actually going to go to the main task, and let me just create one here. Let's go and alter task, main task, resume. Okay. So now, if we wanted to, let's see one more time if we have anything. Nope, still just a 2 task. I think it's been about 2 minutes. So let's confirm some things. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is kind of get a little bit more advanced. So we can actually look at the information schema. Information schema is super important. Pretty much every database, every good database has some type of information schema where you can look at the metadata. And in here, Snowflake actually has one called task dependencies. And notice this here, this recursive value is basically false. And I'm looking at the main task as kind of the top one. What are its dependents? So if we go here and run this query, we can see that we have 2 dependents. So we have our first task here, and we can obviously look at the schedule because it's the only one that's scheduled. And there's, as far as a predecessor, there's nothing above it. That's our top task, right? So this is your standard like parent-child hierarchy. And we can see that illustrated. There's nothing above main task. So we know that's the top task. And then here we can see that predecessor has a value for the other task. So get to the task name. So there's your A and there's your B. And of course, that's correct as well, A and B. But what we don't see is subtask. And that's because this is just showing the initial dependency because we have recursive equals false. If I make this true and run it, then instead of 3 records, I should get 4. And see, we've got started now. Look at that, I caught it.
Christian, there's a question in the chat.
Yes, yeah, there is a log. I'm gonna take a screenshot of this real quick because that's like hitting the lottery that I actually caught that in started state. Yes, so there is a task history. So pretty much sums that up for me, Anupha. So here, okay, if you guys got the dependency piece, that's helpful, right? But trying to see if there's anything in the history that we can discern as a problem or anything like that. So I found this takes a little bit longer to run. I think it's because it's going through logs. I really haven't used it a tremendous amount because a lot of times when you're looking at the history, you're kind of tracking like issue dependency, because in theory, all of your tasks, if they're on a graph, like you could just pull out all the business logic and then just run the business logic step by step by step by step in the corresponding, session variables or anything else. But this would be it. This would be your answer. So great question on the logging. So if you want to find out if your tasks succeeded or failed, or when they failed, or perhaps even why they failed, you can go into the information schema task history. And the cool thing about this, because it's a lot of metadata, you can actually start looking at things like, based on dependency, you can do like a time range or schedule range. And just like any other query, like do that core analysis by filtering and predicating the data with things that are related to it. So this is pretty cool. So this will be the output of something. But notice this is super small example, nothing crazy, no, and that took 20 seconds to get after that information schema. So that might give you some indication of the power of tasks. But if you use them very widely for like core ETL or ELT, that type of thing, or big transformations, right? 20 seconds, that's a long time. I mean, this is an extra small warehouse. Let me just clarify on that piece, right? So most customers we work with are, small, probably at the minimum for any production type compute. So I'm sure this will come back faster in most situations. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions here. All right. So let's do one last check and see what we have in our table now. More than 2 records. Yes, awesome. Okay, so we can see that the main is actually kicked off a couple times. But, the problem here, I think, is I don't know if I actually resumed everything or started everything to begin with. So I don't have my core task resumed or started, actually. Let me do that real quick, and then I'll get to talking on some other wrap-up points, and then we'll come back and check. Make sure everything was actually kind of working. So let me copy this real quick. I thought I had that in my scripts above, but I guess I did not. So run that, and then we'll get this one here. We'll just make sure those are enabled and they'll resume. And then we'll start hitting some fine points. So we're going to resume all these. No. Update graph with root since not suspended. Okay, which are that one, and that one. Okay, that's what we wanted. So they all should be running right now, or at least be enabled to resume when the 2-minute mark comes. So we'll check back in a minute, in a few minutes. Okay, so we got 23, 15, 35. Okay, should be kicking off in like 2 minutes. So let's go back to the PowerPoint here. All right, let me see a couple more questions. Will dependent tasks kick off even if predecessor fails? No, because there's the after statement. So it shouldn't run because it would only run after that one succeeds. If not, anyway, we can ask it to execute upon attempt of previous, irrespective of whatever was successful or not. That is a great question. That is a really, really good question. I think that we might have to actually set up and play with, like fail it on purpose, and then see if it continues down the pipeline. And I think if that is the case, I mean, there could be some workarounds, but I don't know if there's an on failure. You might be throwing me a soft pitch on that one, but I don't actually recall if there's an on failure continue type logic. All right. Yeah, I will look that up after and try to provide some comments on that. That one's good, because you would think, you would have like on failure, on success, that type of thing. So I will confirm. I just don't recall using it. So let me see. Yes, absolutely. So let's just drop into what we did. So we walked through, we created a task by providing, first we had to create the roles, created a temp table, and then we had all these other steps after we created our task to go ahead and make sure that our task was running. We could view the task history and logs, and then we could obviously validate some things, enable, suspend the task and that type of thing. And really that's, for the most part, a productive discussion and walkthrough on probably 95% of use cases for tasks that are out there, right? Well, take that back, probably 80%, because we didn't go into table streams. We'll cover that in a few months, and then we'll bring tasks back into the conversation. So what we went through today covers probably about 80% of using tasks. All right. So again, just review and wrap up. Anything else here to think about? No, I think we covered a lot here about tasks. That was good, and we had some great questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to post our code out on GitHub like we usually do. This is the link to it. Be sure to go out there and give us a star. Invite your friends to kind of check it out as well. And then if there's any issues or any questions like you have, you can go and post them into the issues. We'll be checking those and responding to those issues and clearing them out. So if we do have like typos or something that's not working or something that, quite good questions you want to see, then we can go ahead and we can respond through our GitHub on that. One more question comes in before we wrap it up. Last one. Any way to start a task out of schedule? Something along the lines of alter task start does not equal start. I'm not sure I fully understand that question. Anyway, start task out of schedule along the lines of alter task. Oh yeah, you can do an alter task. Yeah, so yes, yeah, you can run an alter statement and then reschedule it. As a matter of fact, what you could do if you wanted to, because everything in Snowflake is mainly SQL, you could create a task and then it has a subtask, it's a stored procedure, and that stored procedure could in theory look up a table that has a different incremental time, and then you could alter the parent task that's on the schedule with the frequency that's in your table that was called by the stored procedure, something like that. Was that an answer, Sheetal, to your question, or? Okay, awesome. I should have just let you ask it in your own words, but no, the chat works as well. So very cool. Yeah, very, very flexible. I mean, they've built a really fantastic system where everything is kind of in so many ways connected and tied together. So, but that's a really good question. That'll make a great blog post or webinar, like on that one question alone, like the interconnected, correlation of tasks, like a dynamic task scheduling, right? That is cool. Yeah, that'd be a good one. I'll have to tell the team about that one. That's a very technical article though, but one probably worth doing. Well, as always, we have our discussion and Q&A session, but I know people are dropping off. If you guys have any questions, we can stay on for a little bit and just talk through chat. As always, our Data Lakehouse project is in full swing. We're actually releasing Data Lakehouse GA in October. Still looking for companies to beta test Data Lakehouse, but you can actually go to datalakehouse.io. We should probably have the link in here at this point, but you can go to datalakehouse.io and check it out. And we've got a free trial coming up. But again, we're looking for beta testers to anybody's loading their data into Snowflake and wanting to do some really amazing things. That is the platform. And then we've got some upcoming events as usual. So we're scheduled out. Heather, how far out are we scheduled? The next 3-4 months?
Yeah, we've got 2 more on the schedule for now, and I'm probably going to go in tomorrow and add 2 or 3 more after that. So next we've got Snowflake streams, and then we've got security best practices after that in October. So
okay.
Yeah, September 20th, Snowflake streams, October 25th, security best practices so far, and then we'll have a few more on there coming up soon.
Yes, that sounds great. And we've had a lot of demand for bringing back more Python with Snowflake. That seems to be the most requested sort of integration and conversation topic. If there's anyone who has any good business use cases they're looking for us to tackle, integrating Python with Snowflake, let us know. We'll be happy to put something together related to that topic based on your suggestions. So do that. Well, if there's no other questions or topics or anything, we can go ahead and wrap up and thank everybody for joining us in this August Snowflake Carolinas meetup group. And thank you guys for coming. Invite a friend and colleague for the next one, and look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you so much.